The courtroom was tense. Every seat was filled. People whispered among themselves, their voices low, but everyone could feel it, the weight of what was about to happen. The judge's gavel slammed down, silencing the room. Court is now in session, the judge's voice echoed. He was a tall, serious man with gray hair, and his eyes were sharp. Everyone immediately straightened up. The trial was about to begin. Marcus sat in the defendant's chair, his hands gripping the edge tightly. His heart raced. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He had been waiting for this day for weeks, but now that it was here, everything felt like a blur. The room was too quiet, almost like it was holding its breath. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. He was accused of a crime he didn't commit. Everyone around him, from the prosecutor to the judge, looked at him like he was guilty. But Marcus knew the truth. He hadn't done anything wrong. He glanced at the people sitting in the gallery. His family was there, sitting in the back. His mother's eyes were filled with worry, and his father sat next to her, his face grim. Marcus wanted to go to them, tell them everything would be okay, but he knew he couldn't. Not yet. The prosecutor stood up, a tall man named Mr. Walker. His sharp suit and polished shoes made him look like he had everything under control. He was a good lawyer, and Marcus knew he was going to be tough to fight. Mr. Walker walked slowly to the front of the room, his eyes briefly scanning Marcus before he turned to face the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Mr. Walker began, his voice clear and commanding. "Today you will hear the story of a man who has broken the law. You will see the evidence. You will hear the witnesses. And you will come to one conclusion. Marcus Miller is guilty of the crime he is accused of." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. His hands were shaking. How could Mr. Walker say that when it wasn't true? Marcus hadn't done anything wrong. The evidence was all lies, but he had no choice now but to sit there and listen. Mr. Walker turned back to the judge, giving him a quick nod. "Your Honor, we are ready to present our case." The judge nodded and then turned to Marcus. "Mr. Miller, you have been accused of assault. How do you plead?" The room seemed to go even quieter. Marcus felt like the eyes of everyone in the courtroom were on him. He opened his mouth, but the words felt stuck. What if he said the wrong thing? What if the judge didn't believe him? What if he said guilty by mistake? I'm not guilty," Marcus said, his voice shaking a little. "I didn't do anything wrong." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, no one moved. Marcus felt the weight of the room's gaze on him. The judge nodded, as though he expected this answer. "Very well," he said. "We will proceed." Marcus let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His heart was still pounding. He looked at the jury, a group of 12 men and women, all watching him closely. He could see the doubt in their eyes. Could they believe him? Could he convince them that he was innocent? The prosecutor called his first witness, Officer Davis. The room seemed to hold its breath again as Officer Davis stood and walked to the witness stand. The officer was a tall man, with short cropped hair and a strong, confident posture. He wore his police uniform, and his badge gleamed under the bright lights of the courtroom. He looked at Marcus as he walked past, his eyes hard. "Officer Davis, please tell the court what happened on the night of the incident," the prosecutor asked. Officer Davis nodded, his expression calm. "I responded to a call about a disturbance at a local bar. When I arrived, I saw Mr. Marcus Miller arguing with another man. It was clear that there had been a fight. I tried to break it up, but Mr. Miller became aggressive. He pushed me, and that's when I had to arrest him." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. Officer Davis was lying. He had never pushed him. The night at the bar had been chaotic, but Marcus had only tried to stop the fight. He had never laid a hand on the officer. But here was Officer Davis, telling a completely different story. The prosecutor looked satisfied. "Thank you, officer. No further questions." Marcus's mind raced. Officer Davis's story was full of holes, but it didn't matter. The jury was already listening to him, nodding along. Marcus could see the doubt in their eyes grow stronger with every word. Then it was Marcus's turn. His lawyer, a quiet man named Mr. Parker, stood up and called him to the stand. As Marcus stood and walked toward the witness stand, his legs felt like jelly. He had to focus. He couldn't let Officer Davis's lies win. He took a deep breath as he sat down. "Marcus," Mr. Parker asked gently, "can you tell the court what happened that night?" Marcus looked around the courtroom. His eyes found his parents, and they gave him a small, reassuring nod. He knew what he had to do. "I was at the bar, but I wasn't fighting," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I was trying to help. There was another man, and he started shouting at a woman. I tried to calm him down, but he got angry. That's when Officer Davis came in and grabbed me." The room was quiet. Marcus could feel all eyes on him. "I didn't push anyone. I didn't attack anyone. But Officer Davis is saying that I did. He's lying." The words came out before he could stop them. The silence in the room was thick now. The judge looked up at him, his face unreadable. Marcus took another breath. He knew this wasn't over. The hardest part was still ahead, but for the first time since the trial began, he felt a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the truth would come out. The courtroom buzzed with quiet whispers as the day went on. The air was thick with tension. Marcus sat back down in the defendant's chair, his hands still trembling. His lawyer, Mr. Parker, had asked him to speak his truth, but Marcus wasn't sure it had been enough. Officer Davis's lies still hung heavy in the air. The jury's eyes didn't look as convinced as Marcus had hoped. It felt like everyone in the room was against him. The judge, the prosecutor, and even the jury members seemed to be leaning toward Officer Davis's version of events. He was a respected police officer, after all. People trusted him. But Marcus knew the truth that no one else seemed to see. As the trial continued, the prosecutor began to call more witnesses. One by one, people stepped up to the stand, giving their testimony. Most of them had seen the fight at the bar and confirmed Officer Davis's story. Each witness painted a picture of Marcus as an angry, violent man. But none of them had seen everything. None of them knew the whole story. As each witness left the stand, Marcus's anxiety grew. Every word they spoke seemed to push him further into a corner. His defense was crumbling. He had to do something. But what? How could he prove he was telling the truth when it felt like everyone believed the officer over him? Finally, the prosecutor finished presenting his witnesses. The courtroom was quiet for a moment, and then, as if on cue, Officer Davis stood up and walked back to the stand. His face was calm, too calm, like he knew exactly what was coming next. Marcus's stomach churned. He couldn't take it anymore. Officer Davis was lying, and Marcus needed to expose him. But how? The prosecutor asked the officer a simple question, but Marcus's mind was elsewhere, focusing on the piece of information he had kept to himself. It was something that could change everything, but Marcus had been too scared to speak up, until now. "Officer Davis," the prosecutor said, "you've given your testimony, and you've stated that Mr. Miller attacked you. Can you tell us exactly why Mr. Miller would do something like that?" The question hung in the air. Marcus clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. The courtroom waited for the officer's response, but Marcus wasn't listening anymore. He was replaying the events of that night in his mind. The fight, the shouting, the way everything had gotten out of control. Then, a flash of memory struck him. He remembered something from the night he was arrested, something that no one had mentioned in the trial yet. It was small, almost forgotten, but it could make all the difference. Marcus's eyes locked onto Officer Davis, his mind made up. He knew what he had to do. "Your Honor," Marcus's voice suddenly broke through the silence. "I'd like to speak again." The judge looked at him, a bit surprised. "Mr. Miller, you've already given your statement. Why do you feel the need to speak again?" Marcus stood up, his legs feeling shaky, but his voice steady. "Because there's something you don't know. Something that's important. Something no one has talked about." The room fell silent. All eyes turned toward him, waiting for him to continue. Marcus swallowed hard. He could feel his heart racing again, but he knew he couldn't back down now. That night at the bar, Officer Davis wasn't just an officer. He was there with someone he shouldn't have been with. A murmur went through the courtroom. The judge looked at Marcus with a raised eyebrow. "What are you saying, Mr. Miller?" Marcus took a deep breath and pushed forward. Officer Davis was with another man, a man who had been banned from that bar before, a man who caused trouble all the time. The man that Officer Davis was supposed to be watching out for. A hush fell over the room. The prosecutor's face went pale. Officer Davis's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. Marcus continued. I didn't attack Officer Davis that night. He wasn't arresting me for no reason. He was helping that man. He was protecting him. And when I got in the way, he decided to make me the scapegoat. He started a fight with me, and then when I didn't fight back, he turned it on me. That's when he arrested me. The room was frozen. No one spoke for a long moment. The judge tapped his gavel, signaling for order, but the weight of Marcus's words hung in the air. Mr. Miller, the judge finally said, his voice grave. This is a serious accusation. Are you sure of what you are saying? Marcus nodded. I am. He could feel the eyes of the entire courtroom on him. Officer Davis stood still, his face a mask of emotionless calm. But Marcus could see the anger in his eyes. It was clear the officer didn't want this truth to come out. But it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted. The prosecutor quickly turned to Officer Davis, his voice shaking with anger. Is this true, Officer Davis? Were you helping that man? Were you involved in something illegal that night? For the first time, Officer Davis hesitated. The confident facade cracked, just for a moment. He glanced at the prosecutor and then at Marcus. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus had done it. He had pointed out the lie. He had shown that Officer Davis wasn't the man everyone thought he was. But it wasn't over yet. The truth had just been laid bare. And Marcus knew that now. Everything had changed. The courtroom was a whirlwind of whispers. The tension in the air could be cut with a knife. Marcus's words echoed in the minds of everyone present. For the first time, the tables had turned. The police officer who had seemed so untouchable was now being questioned. But the question on everyone's mind was, would Marcus's bold accusation be enough? The judge looked at the prosecutor, who seemed rattled by Marcus's sudden revelation. Mr. Walker, do you have any response to this new claim? The prosecutor didn't answer right away. He stood up slowly, as though trying to process what had just happened. Your Honor, this is an extremely serious accusation, he finally said. And we cannot proceed without further investigation. We need to know if Mr. Miller is telling the truth. The judge nodded, his face serious. I agree. This trial cannot continue until we have the full picture. We will recess for 2 hours while the court looks into this matter. As the judge slammed his gavel, signaling the recess, the room remained still. Marcus's heart hammered in his chest. He had spoken the truth. But what now? Would anyone believe him? Would Officer Davis get away with it, as he had before? He glanced at his parents, who were sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom. His mother had her hands clasped together in prayer. His father looked tense, his fingers tapping nervously on the armrest of the chair. Marcus knew how much this meant to them. They were just as desperate for the truth to come out as he was. But even as the recess was called, Marcus couldn't help but feel the weight of the room's eyes on him. People looked at him like he was some kind of hero for standing up to the officer, but Marcus knew better. This wasn't about being a hero. This was about justice. As Marcus stood up, ready to leave the courtroom for the recess, Officer Davis's cold gaze followed him. The officer's face was unreadable, but there was something dangerous about the way he looked at Marcus. It was as though he was daring him to keep going, to keep pushing. Marcus wasn't scared, not anymore. He had come this far. Now nothing would stop him from telling the truth. Outside the courtroom, Marcus's lawyer, Mr. Parker, approached him. You did well, Marcus, he said, his voice low. But the real challenge is still ahead. We need to make sure the evidence backs up what you've said. If we don't find that, everything we've worked for could fall apart. Marcus nodded, his throat dry. He had done his part. Now, it was time to hope that the truth would find a way to surface. The 2 hours of recess felt like a lifetime. The waiting room outside the courtroom was filled with people, all of them anxious. Marcus sat in a corner, staring at the floor, his mind racing with questions. What if Officer Davis had already covered his tracks? What if there was no proof to back up his story? Then, just as Marcus's hope began to fade, he saw a familiar face. It was a reporter who had been following the case from the very beginning. She had been in the courtroom the entire time, taking notes and observing everything. Her name was Lisa Turner, and she had been asking Marcus questions since the very first day of his trial. "Marcus, I've been talking to a few people in the bar where this all happened," she said, her voice low but urgent. "I've found something that could help your case. I've talked to a few of the employees who were there that night. They didn't want to speak up before, but now they're ready to." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. What did they say? Lisa leaned in closer. "One of the employees saw Officer Davis talking to that man, the one who was banned from the bar, the one who caused all the trouble. They were seen leaving together after the fight. I think it's the key to proving that Officer Davis wasn't just doing his job that night." Marcus's mind raced. This was it, the piece of the puzzle that could clear his name. The truth was coming together, piece by piece. But there was one problem. The employees who had witnessed it were scared. They didn't want to testify because they feared retaliation from the police. "I'll do everything I can to help," Lisa said. "I can get in touch with them. I just need you to be ready to speak out." Marcus nodded, determination filling him. "I'm ready." The 2 hours were up before Marcus could even fully process the weight of what Lisa had said. The courtroom doors opened, and everyone filed back in. The judge took his seat, and the trial resumed. But this time, the atmosphere was different. There was a new sense of urgency. The prosecutor stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor, after further investigation, we have found new evidence that requires us to call Officer Davis back to the stand. We have spoken to several witnesses who were present at the scene, and we have new information to present." Marcus's heart pounded. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. The prosecutor turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard testimony from Officer Davis, but now we are going to hear from others who were there that night, people who saw everything, people who will show that Officer Davis's version of the events is not the truth." The room held its breath as Officer Davis was called back to the stand. This time, he looked uneasy. For the first time, the confidence that had once defined him seemed to be slipping away. The prosecutor began asking him questions, but the officer's answers were stumbling. He shifted in his seat and avoided eye contact. Then, the key moment came. The prosecutor asked Officer Davis about the man he had been seen leaving the bar with, the man who had caused so much trouble. Officer Davis hesitated. And in that silence, Marcus knew. The truth was coming out. Slowly, but surely, the lies were unraveling. The tension in the courtroom was unbearable. Every eye was fixed on Officer Davis as he squirmed in his seat. The prosecutor, Mr. Walker, had just asked the question everyone had been waiting for. "Who was the man you left the bar with that night?" Officer Davis swallowed hard. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. His hands gripped the edge of the stand, his knuckles turning white. For the first time, the officer looked unsure, like he had been caught in a trap he couldn't escape. I don't know what you're talking about," Davis finally stammered, but his voice lacked the confidence it had held before. The courtroom was still, waiting for him to explain himself, but his eyes darted around nervously. It was clear to everyone that something was off. Mr. Walker wasn't about to let him off the hook. "We have witnesses, Officer Davis. They've seen you with this man, leaving the bar together. You're lying. You can't deny it anymore." The room went silent again as the prosecutor's words sank in. Marcus felt a knot in his stomach, the suspense nearly unbearable. Could this really be the moment when everything changed? Could Officer Davis really be exposed for the lies he told? Then, without warning, the door to the courtroom opened, and in walked the two witnesses Lisa had spoken to earlier, the employees from the bar. They were hesitant, their eyes wide with fear. They had clearly been pressured to stay silent, but now, with the truth on the verge of coming out, they couldn't stay quiet any longer. The tension in the room heightened as the two men slowly made their way to the witness stand. The entire courtroom was waiting, holding its breath, as the witnesses took their seats. The first man, a bartender named Kyle, spoke first. He looked directly at Officer Davis, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I saw you that night, you and him, leaving the bar together. I saw it with my own eyes. You were talking in private, and then you both left." He was a troublemaker, someone who had caused problems in the past, and we all knew it. But you, Officer Davis, you were supposed to be in control. You were supposed to be stopping people like him. The room was dead silent. The evidence was mounting, and the lies were falling apart. But Officer Davis remained stone-faced, unwilling to acknowledge the truth. His gaze shifted between the witnesses and the prosecutor, but he didn't speak. The second witness, a bouncer named Mark, gave his testimony. "I saw the same thing," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "After the fight broke out, I saw you two leave together. You weren't trying to stop anything. You were covering for him. You both left the bar, and I heard you say something to him. Something about keeping your job and making sure no one found out." The courtroom murmured with shock. This was the first time anyone had heard these details, and they were damning. The pieces of the puzzle were finally fitting together. Officer Davis had not only been dishonest, but he had also been involved in something far worse than anyone had imagined. As the witnesses finished, the prosecutor turned to Officer Davis with a look of accusation. "Is this true, officer? Were you covering up for this man? Were you involved in his actions that night? What were you doing?" Officer Davis's face turned pale. For a moment, he remained silent, staring straight ahead. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His eyes shifted toward Marcus, who was sitting at the defendant's table. Marcus could see the fear in the officer's eyes now, something he had never seen before. The truth was closing in on him. Officer Davis began, but his voice faltered. I didn't do anything wrong." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "You were there. You covered for a troublemaker, and you're lying to this court. The evidence is clear. The witnesses have spoken. Your story doesn't add up." Marcus felt his heart race. The truth was finally out, and Officer Davis's defense was crumbling. But even as the officer's lies were being exposed, Marcus knew this battle wasn't over. There was still a chance that Officer Davis would find a way to wiggle out of it. Then, unexpectedly, the defense attorney stood up. "Objection, Your Honor," he said loudly, his voice shaky. "We haven't verified the credibility of these witnesses. They're just employees from the bar. They may be lying to protect Mr. Miller." The judge frowned and looked at the defense attorney. "You've made your objections clear, but the jury has already heard the testimony, and it stands." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. The defense had no more tricks up their sleeves. Everything was out in the open now. The witnesses had spoken. The truth had been told. It was up to the jury now. The courtroom was still. Everyone was waiting. The jury was listening, their eyes fixed on the stand. It felt like the moment of truth was just around the corner, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Officer Davis was still in the room, still a figure of power. He wasn't done yet. And then, Marcus's lawyer, Mr. Parker, stood up, walking confidently toward the judge. He spoke in a calm, measured tone, addressing the court one final time before closing arguments. "Your Honor," he began, "we have presented irrefutable evidence. The defendant's story has been confirmed by multiple witnesses. Officer Davis has been caught in a lie, and his actions that night cannot be justified. We ask that the court dismiss the charges against Mr. Miller and release him immediately." The words echoed through the room, the weight of them settling on everyone's shoulders. Marcus's chest tightened, but for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself a small glimmer of hope. The truth was no longer hidden. The lies had been uncovered, and it was clear that justice was finally on its way. But even as the jury deliberated and the trial moved toward its conclusion, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Officer Davis wouldn't give up so easily. Something told him that the battle for his freedom was far from over. The courtroom was buzzing with anticipation as the jury deliberated. Marcus sat quietly, his hands resting on the table, his fingers tapping nervously. His eyes shifted toward the door as if willing the jurors to hurry up and come to a decision. Every minute felt like an hour. The weight of the past few days hung heavily on him. It had been a long fight, and although the evidence against Officer Davis seemed overwhelming, Marcus couldn't help but wonder, would the jury believe it? Would they see the truth for what it was, or would Davis's years of power and influence be enough to cloud their judgment? His lawyer, Mr. Parker, sat beside him, flipping through his notes. There was no denying that they had built a strong case, but the defense had fought hard to undermine the witnesses. The fear that Officer Davis would somehow walk free still gnawed at Marcus's mind. Suddenly, the doors to the courtroom swung open, and the jury filed in, their expressions unreadable. Marcus stood up, his heart racing. His palms were clammy as he tried to calm himself. The judge rose from his seat, his gavel ready. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked, his voice deep and serious. The jury foreman, a middle-aged woman with dark glasses, nodded solemnly. "We have, Your Honor." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. This was it, the moment of truth. "Please read the verdict," the judge instructed. The foreman stood, holding the paper with the jury's decision. She cleared her throat before speaking. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Officer Davis, guilty of misconduct and dishonesty in his actions on the night in question." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Marcus felt a surge of relief wash over him, but there was no time to celebrate. The words that followed struck him hard, like a punch to the stomach. "However," the foreman continued, "we find that the charges against Mr. Miller, the plaintiff, are to be dropped. The evidence against him is insufficient to hold him responsible for any wrongdoing." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The tension that had built over the past days finally started to break. Marcus's knees buckled slightly as he sat back down, stunned by the verdict. He had expected justice to be served, but not like this. He had expected the trial to be more difficult, with more twists, more obstacles. But the outcome was clear. Officer Davis's power had finally been shattered. But just as Marcus began to let out a breath of relief, a voice rang out from the back of the courtroom. "No, this is wrong. It's not supposed to happen like this." Everyone turned toward the voice. It was Officer Davis, standing up from his seat, his face red with fury. His eyes burned with anger, and for a moment, it seemed like he might explode. His jaw clenched, and his fists curled into tight, trembling balls. "Officer Davis," the judge called out sternly, "you will sit down and remain quiet. The court has rendered its verdict." But Officer Davis wasn't listening. He was moving toward the door. "You think this is over?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the courtroom. "You don't know who I am. You don't know what I can do." His words sent a chill through the room. It was as if he had forgotten he was no longer in control. His threats fell flat in the face of justice, but it was clear that he wasn't done fighting. Davis's anger was palpable, but no one in the room was scared, not anymore. His influence was crumbling, and there was nothing left to hold him up. The bailiff moved toward Officer Davis, trying to calm him down. "Sir, please sit down," he urged, but Davis shoved him aside. Marcus's heart pounded. He had been so close to getting his life back, but now, it seemed like the officer was on the verge of a breakdown. The tension in the courtroom was so thick you could feel it in the air. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Suddenly, there was a loud crash. Everyone turned to see Officer Davis lunge toward the prosecutor, Mr. Walker. He knocked over a stack of papers in the process, and the courtroom gasped. Before anyone could react, a group of officers entered the room, moving quickly to restrain Officer Davis. It was clear that his outburst had pushed him too far. Marcus watched, his chest tightening, as the officers took control of the situation. Officer Davis struggled, but there was no escaping the truth now. His lies had come to light, and no amount of anger or threats could change that. As Davis was escorted out of the courtroom, handcuffed and subdued, the judge banged his gavel. "Court is adjourned," he announced, signaling the end of the trial. The room filled with a mix of emotions. Some people were in shock, others were relieved. Marcus, on the other hand, felt a strange sense of emptiness. He had won. He had gotten the justice he deserved. But something was still missing. He wasn't sure what it was, but the victory felt incomplete. The reporters swarmed the exits, eager to get their statements. Lisa Turner, the reporter who had helped Marcus throughout the trial, approached him with her microphone. "Marcus, how does it feel to finally see justice served?" Marcus took a deep breath, trying to find the words. "It feels like a weight has been lifted, but I can't forget how many others are still out there, fighting for the truth." This isn't just about me. Lisa nodded, clearly understanding. You've inspired so many people by standing up for what's right. Do you think this trial will change things in the future? Marcus looked around at the chaos of the courtroom, the police officers still discussing the aftermath of the outburst, and the reporters capturing every moment. He knew that change was hard, but it was possible. Maybe this was just the beginning. Maybe his story would spark something bigger. I hope it does, he said quietly, his voice full of determination. I hope it changes everything.